questions.
Oral questions. Question Borealis. Maple MAGA up to bat.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, after Prime Minister Harper managed to exempt Canada from the Buy American policies, this Prime Minister caved in and allowed Donald Trump to reimpose those tariffs. After Mr. Harper succeeded in putting an end to the softwood lumber tariffs, this Prime Minister caved in again to Donald Trump and saw those tariffs reimposed. Can Canadians have a leader that will defend jobs and bring our companies back home? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, whatever from the Conservative leader. We defended supply management. We defended our
whatever major loser
workers. We
what is this, high
defended
school?
NAFTA and improved it for people on both sides of the border. But the Conservative Party and this Conservative leader, they're the ones who lowered investment in defense spending to less than 1% of GDP, and that had consequences for border security. We're the ones who are going to stand up for Canadian security. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The New York Times reported a decade ago that Canada had the richest middle class in the world, and the median incomes for Canadians were higher than in the United States. Oh, how things have changed. After 9 years of liberal taxes, red tape, and attacks on our energy sector, Americans make $32,000 more than Canadians. And now, a newly elected American president wants to take our jobs for Americans. We understand why Donald Trump wants to take Canadian jobs, but why does this Prime Minister want to help him?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we successfully renegotiated NAFTA and protected Canadian jobs, protected steel workers and aluminum workers, protected our supply managed sectors and agricultural workers, protected Canadians from one coast to coast to the coast, from coast to coast to coast, the leader of the Conservative Party at the time referred to our approach as dumb, Mr. Speaker. Successfully standing up for Canadians is not dumb. But you know what is dumb, Mr. Speaker? Refusing to get your security clearance.
There he goes.
Protect members of your caucus so you can protect Canadians. Get the briefing on national security.
There's no need for the clearance. There never was. There won't ever will be.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, his approach was dumb. It was dumb to let the Americans reimpose Buy America rules that Harper had got lifted. It was dumb to let Trump impose softwood lumber tariffs that Biden has now doubled. But you know what is dumb, dumber, and dumbest of all? Imposing a 61 cent a litre carbon tax that will force our trucking companies, our factories, and our mines to head south of the border into the arms of President Trump. We know why he wants to create American jobs with the Canadian money, but why does this Prime Minister want to help him?
Wow. Put some W's in the chat. Put some W's in the chat.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we stood up and protected Canadian jobs, Canadian industry, and Canadian trade. We know that the American government cares about creating prosperity in North America, and we're going to do it together. But what the American government, and particularly this president, also cares about is defense and national security. Well, the leader of the Conservative Party was sitting around the cabinet table when they dropped spending on defense to below 1%, and the Americans won't understand any more than Canadians
Trudeau,
do.
take the L, bro.
The leader of the opposition refuses to take national security seriously, refuses to get his...
Trudeau is hitting like 1.4% of our GDP when we're supposed to be hitting 2%.
Colleagues, I know it's Wednesday. It's really important, though.
He's not in the mic.
An opportunity to
The petition work.
only recognize the person who's speaking at the time, so that the speaker.
It's the biggest, it's the best, it's the greatest petition.
Honourable Leader of the
Most
Opposition.
effective.
Mr. Speaker, maybe the reason why Conservatives were able to get rid of Buy America and softwood lumber tariffs is because we helped the Americans crush the Taliban and ISIS, whereas this Prime Minister couldn't even shoot down a Chinese weather balloon over northern Canada. Now he wants to impose a tariff on his own companies, a 61 cent a litre carbon tax, 300% higher than it is right now, where there's a 0% carbon tax south of the border. Why does he want to create an avalanche of Canadian businesses, jobs, and paychecks leaving for America?
This is the gift that keeps on giving.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we saw it once again right now. The Conservative leader constantly talking down the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, talking down and nickel and diming our veterans. They shuttered 9 veteran services offices, cut thousands of staff from people helping veterans, and made cuts to the Canadian Armed Forces that brought our spending on defense to below 1%. Mr. Speaker, he won't even commit to our timeline to get it up to 2%. And he will not get his security clearance so he can get the briefing necessary
There's no need.
to keep all Canadians safe.
There's no need. There never was. There never will be.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, 10 years ago, the New York Times said that Canada's middle class was the most affluent in the world and that the average income was higher in Canada than in the U.S. Today, the average Canadian worker earns $32,000 less than their American counterpart after tax, because of all the taxes and economic obstacles the Liberals have put in place. Now the Americans want to steal our jobs and bring them to the U.S. Can there not be an election so that Quebecers can choose who is going to defend their jobs? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians remember very clearly what Stephen Harper's approach was, which was to bow down to the Americans. But we stood up to protect supply management, to renegotiate NAFTA, to protect our aluminum and steel workers. We will always stand up for the Canadian worker. And we're going to invest in national security, which is the thing the Conservatives failed to do. They lowered spending to less than 1% of GDP. And at the same time, the Conservative leader keeps refusing to get his security clearance and to take national security seriously.
He doesn't need it. Just release the names, pal.
Mr. Speaker, it seems likely that after the election of President Trump yesterday, a certain number, in fact, a definite number of people in the U.S. will seek to leave the U.S. and will seek asylum here in Canada. Has the government already made plans?
18 million people getting deported. January 21st.
The influx of asylum seekers, knowing that people who've been here for 2 weeks can make a refugee claim as they did through Roxham Road. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, like any responsible government, for months we've been preparing for whatever the outcome was of the U.S. election last night. We will always work to protect our economy, our workers in the forestry industry, our farmers, our aluminum and steel workers, and we're going to be there to protect the integrity of our borders and our immigration system. We've always been able to work well with the Americans, and we'll keep doing that in order to manage the border and the economy responsibly. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. That seems a bit of a general answer. It's a bit vague, given that there could be millions of people in the U.S. who are going to have to leave, perhaps even in short order. And if they happen to get through in an irregular fashion and stay for a couple of weeks, then they will be able to stay longer. Has the government taken steps to at least ensure that asylum seekers will be distributed according to the population of each province and Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, this government has already shown its ability to work to protect the integrity of both our immigration system and our borders in working together with the Americans to improve the system and also to make sure that Roxham Road was closed down. We've been able to take steps to better distribute refugees across the country. We will continue to work responsibly and reasonably to ensure that our borders and our immigration system are managed responsibly.
For some reason, I don't believe him.
Canadians are worried that Donald Trump's plans will hurt people. They're particularly worried that his plans to impose across-the-board tariffs are going to hurt Canadian jobs. It's going to mean that the cost of everything is going to go up. So will the Prime Minister today stand up today and say that Donald Trump's plans are wrong?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as we've demonstrated
What kind of
before,
question
we will
was that?
continue to work constructively with the American administration. We will continue to defend Canadian jobs and interests while we look to create growth and prosperity on both sides of the border. We stood up for Canadian agricultural workers, for Canadian steel and aluminum workers, for Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and we did it with a Team Canada approach that brought together labor union, businesses, premiers of all different provinces. We will continue to work together to stand up for Canadians and create prosperity for everyone in North America.
That's right.
Oh, that's so weak from Jagmeet.
South.
Canadians are worried about losing their jobs.
What Donald Trump is proposing to do threatens jobs in Canada. He's threatening to put tariffs on things that will increase the cost of living and also threaten jobs at a time when the cost of living is already too high. Is the Prime Minister ready today to stand up and clearly state that Donald Trump is wrong? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, when Mr. Trump, during his first term as president, threatened to rip up NAFTA, we were able to work with him not just to defend workers and the Canadian economy, but also to improve the deal to create opportunities for everyone in North America. We will continue to work responsibly to defend the values, interests, and jobs of Canadians, while at the same time knowing that we can do this together to create more prosperity all across North America.
L'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After Mr. Harper managed to get rid of the tariffs on softwood lumber, this Prime Minister caved in and allowed those tariffs to be reimposed, and now they've been doubled by Mr. Biden. President Trump is threatening to go even further. There are already hundreds of workers in the Saguenay who've lost their jobs because this Prime Minister caved in. When will there be an election so Canadians can choose a Prime Minister who will defend our jobs and bring back good paychecks?
Yeah, make Canada great again.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, a few years ago, when we were able to defend NAFTA and Canadian jobs and workers, we were able to work with Conservative premiers, with unions, with workers and industry associations all across the country as Team Canada in order to defend our interests and create growth all across North America. But you know who didn't get involved in that exercise was the Conservative leader who was sulking and said that we had to give in because it wasn't going to work. That's not what people want. People want a government that will stand up for them. The Right Honourable Leader of the Opposition. He also gave in on Buy America, that policy that was discriminatory against our construction, steel, and aluminum firms who could no longer sell their products for construction projects, government or public projects. And that was, we had an exemption for years under Harper, but then it was reimposed under Trump with this Prime Minister's agreement. He signed a so-called free trade deal, but that included Buy America as part of the deal. So can we have an election so that we can fight for our construction workers and other workers?
I'm down for that, man. I think we're all waiting for the election.
We will always work with the Americans to create prosperity while at the same time defending our workers here. But speaking of defense, Mr. Speaker, we will not be lectured by the member opposite. He was a member of Harper's cabinet, and the current Conservative leader was there when they decided to reduce investment in defense to below 1% of GDP, which the Americans absolutely did not want us to do. We're going to increase it to 2%, and they refuse to commit to that. He also refuses to get the security clearance he needs in order to deal with national security files. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. At the time, our per capita GDP was equal to the American. In fact, Canadian workers were earning more than their American counterparts. But after 9 years of taxes and this government's economic obstacles, this radical liberal government's obstacles, we can see that Americans are now earning $34,000 more per person. And the GDP has increased by 18% per capita, while it's gone down in Canada. We know why Mr. Trump wants to create jobs in the U.S. Why does this Prime Minister want to help him do that? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I know Donald Trump well enough to know that he would be very confused, as are Canadians, in trying to understand why the Leader of the Opposition in these
won't get his security clearance
times with hostility abroad and so on, why does he keep refusing to get the security clearance he needs in order to get top secret briefings so that he can protect his members and Canadians? The Conservative leader refuses to get security briefings. Donald Trump wouldn't understand that, and Canadians don't either.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.